Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, April 13th, 2026, and our dear friend Paul Carrick Roberts is here with us. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you, Nima.
Paul, let me start with the negotiations in Islamabad in Pakistan. What has happened? What do you make of what has happened in Pakistan?
Well, um, we don't have very good information. We get, Trump's version. It seems to me what happened, Nima, is that the Iranians believed that their 10-point program would be the document um, that would be discussed and negotiated. They may have misunderstood Trump when he said that he accepted that as a basis for negotiation. I don't think he ever accepted it. He grabbed hold of it in order to get out of his impossible vow to destroy Iran that night. It seems that the Americans came with their own version of what Iran was to agree to. And this probably shocked the Iranians. And Trump used it to not negotiate, claiming that the Iranians would not agree not to make a nuclear weapon. But I've never seen any statement by any of the Iranian leaders, the ones that are still alive, the ones that are dead, that they intended to make a nuclear weapon. They've always said that they won't make it. As best I remember, Nima, Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and so that means they agreed not to make a nuclear weapon. And as I understand the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran retains the rights to enrich uranium. They just renounce the right to use uranium to make a nuclear weapon. So everything that Iran is doing is within their rights. They're not making a nuclear weapon. And why it matters, I don't know. Why does it matter if they make a nuclear weapon? Israel illegally made nuclear weapons. Pakistan made them. India made them. Before long, everybody will have them. So the notion that a nuclear weapon in Pakistan, in Iran's hands, is more dangerous than a weapon in any other country's hands. What is the basis for that? I think we've noted several times on your program that Iran hasn't attacked anybody in a long time. It's not, it's not Israel. It's not the United States. So I think that the Iranians should not have gone. They should have known that nothing could come of it. And by agreeing to a ceasefire, they broke their own vow that there would be no ceasefire. So I thought when they broke their own rule that they would not agree to a ceasefire, they showed weakness, and Trump quickly took advantage of it. And I think that's what's happened. So I think the negotiations were a mistake for Iran. And the Iranian voice is not as loud, it's easy to censor. And so the world gets Trump's version, which is, well, they wouldn't agree not to make a bomb, which, as far as I know, is a lie. So they broke the vow and they set themselves up for Trump to again demonize as somebody who's determined to make a nuclear weapon. Why it matters, I don't know. Then they're probably no more prone to use it than anyone else. In fact, they may be less prone to use it. So that's my take on it. The negotiations in Pakistan were a mistake. And I don't really understand why Pakistan didn't understand that. Why did Pakistan think that anything could come out of any negotiation with Trump when Israel has Trump under their thumb? That's the reason for the war. So Israel took Trump to war against Iran, just like they took Trump to war against Libya, Iraq, Syria, and just like uh, Israel commanded Trump and J.D. Vance to say the ceasefire doesn't include Lebanon. So Israel runs the show, not Trump. Trump is an agent for Israel. I saw the other day someone said that Trump is Netanyahu's mistress. So maybe that's the case.
Actually, what has happened with the negotiations, 21 hours of negotiation, it seems multiple times JD Vance has called someone in Washington, and once he called Benjamin Netanyahu. That's not of concern, Paul. Why does he need to call Benjamin Netanyahu during the negotiations?
Because Netanyahu is in charge, not Trump, not Vance.
Yeah.
You see, we've talked about it. What goes unremarked is that the cause of all the trouble is the Zionist agenda of Greater Israel. We've been watching this agenda unfold for the first quarter of the 21st century. It was presented to us by the American neoconservatives. First, it was Norman Podhoretz, the editor of the Jewish magazine, what's it called? I forget the name of it. It's a prominent.
Which one? Hearts?
What?
Hearts? Hearts.
No, it's not a newspaper. It's an American.
It's American.
An American Jewish magazine. It's an intellectual magazine. I once had something published in it. I forget the name of it right now. Norman Podhoretz was the editor. Let's see, what was it called? Anyhow, he first presented the notion that with the Soviet collapse, the United States was now the unipolar power.
We have the Forward. We have the Tablet magazine. And these are the magazines of,
No, it's a very prominent intellectual magazine. When I was in university as a professor, to publish in it was a sign that you were very aware of what you were writing about. It was look up Norman Podhoretz, and it'll tell you about him. He was a prominent Jewish intellectual, and
whose name is Norman?
Norman. It's Podhoretz, Podhoretz, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the editor-in-chief. Commentary?
Commentary. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. It's been some years since I've seen it, but it was a magazine that everyone who is interested in world events would read to see what the Jewish position was, the Israeli position. And anyhow, the first, it was Podhoretz who first set out in commentary 7 countries in 5 years. And he said this can be done now because the Soviets are gone and there's no check on American action anywhere. And of course, this was before China was capable of standing up for itself. So, and then we had this repeated in the American neoconservative publication, Strategy for the New American Century, or something like that. I forget what it was called, but there again we see the Middle East is to be cleared out. And then we had 4-star General Wesley Clark, the United States commander of the forces in Europe, of NATO, who said on television 2 or 3 times that generals in the Pentagon had called him into the office and said, "Sir, look, we're going to attack Iraq." And he said, "Well, why? Why are we doing that?" And the general said, "Well, we don't know." But and then the next time he was there, they said, "General, it's worse now. It's 7 countries in 5 years." And so he spilled the beans. He thought it was ridiculous, but I guess by then he was retired. So as long as you have this agenda that God gave the Middle East to Israel, there can't be any peace if that is the agenda of the Israeli government. And under Netanyahu and the Zionist parties that support his coalition, that's the agenda. Now, it's actually, if polls can be believed, a minority agenda inside Israel, but it has dominated the 21st century. So if you are faced with an agenda like that, you can't negotiate. What can you negotiate? The agenda is to get rid of the 7 countries that are barriers to Israeli control of the entire Middle East. And the countries were named out. Podhoretz named them. Sometimes they vary a little. I don't think Turkey was in the original group of countries that had to be destroyed by the United States. And of course, 9/11, when the World Trade Center was attacked and the Pentagon was attacked, and this was blamed on Osama bin Laden, and this became what the American neoconservatives called the New Pearl Harbor. It was their excuse now to go and invade those Muslim countries and overturn them, get rid of them. And in fact, they have, because there's not a functioning state in Libya or Iraq or Syria. And in fact, just the other day, one of the Israeli ministers described how much of the Syrian territory was now part of Israel already. And they said all of Palestine is now Israel. Palestine no longer exists. It's us, it's ours. And they said that we now take Lebanon up to the river. So you can see that they have an agenda of taking the territory of Arab states, of Muslim states. And of course, Iran is one of them, and Iran is especially in the way because Iran supplies Hezbollah in Lebanon, which resists the Israeli encroachments, and Iran supplies the Houthis in Yemen, and so you can see if Iran isn't there, there's nobody to supply Hezbollah, and so Lebanon is opened up for Israel, and if there's no one to supply the Houthis, then Yemen is opened up. And Israel has already claimed now Saudi Arabia is now part of Greater Israel. Well, if you're dealing with a country that thinks no one has a right in the Middle East to exist but Israel, and remember, it was just in February, was that a couple of months ago, the former Israeli Prime Minister Bennett came to the United States to address the annual conference of American Jewish organizations. And he said, Turkey is the next Iran. Well, at the time, he expected that the American and Israeli attack would get rid of Iran, and it hasn't. It wasn't successful. It doesn't mean the Israelis have given up. So this is the reason that any negotiation is pointless. It's almost stupid. It makes no sense. And so it tells me that the Pakistan has no comprehension whatsoever about Greater Israel, and neither does the Iranian government. The Iranian government doesn't seem to be aware of something that has been widely publicized. The editor of commentary, the Project for the New American Century, General Wesley Clark on television, Israeli prime ministers holding up a map of Greater Israel. It's not hidden. It's not a secret conspiracy. It's wide open. And no one ever takes any attention, pays any attention to it. It just like it doesn't exist. But that's the reason that there can't be any negotiations. And I'm kind of puzzled that the Iranians aren't even aware of what they face. And Turkey, now, yeah, and Turkey, Saudi Arabia, they're all in line. They're all part of 7 countries in 5 years. And yet they've never united. They've never said anything. They've never asked Israel, well, why is it you think Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Libya and Syria and Lebanon belong to you? How do you think that? Well, we're here. We've been here a long time. What do you mean this is Greater Israel? They've never asked that question. So I guess they just don't realize what's in store for them. Or it's again a triumph of hope over facts.
Yeah. Paul, this idea of a naval blockade by Donald Trump came with an article in the Just the News in the website Just the News, and here is what Donald Trump shared the same day that JD Vance was negotiating with Iranians. Here is the article. I think he found it the same day of negotiation. That's why he somehow came with this idea. The article is this: the Trump card. The president holds if Iran won't bend a naval blockade. It's written by John Solomon. And it's talking about that how a naval blockade can help Donald Trump. And considering that, Paul, JD Vance has decided to leave Islamabad right at, after the negotiation in the first day on Saturday, because they agreed to negotiate on Sunday as well. Then suddenly he said, I'm going to get back to Washington. And the question is, why was that? What was the rush? And if he was willing to negotiate with Iranians, because this idea of blockade, a naval blockade, it's not gonna, no,
Well,
it's
Noma, the idea of a naval blockade is nonsense. The reason Vance went back was when the Americans presented the terms to Iran, Iran didn't accept them. And so there wasn't the negotiation based on the Iranian 10 points. The Americans said, here, this is what you have to do.
But
And
they
the
said
Iran,
what I talked today. I talked with Professor Marandi. He was in Islamabad with the Iranian team. What he said that they achieved some sort of, agreements, initial agreements about the framework of what would happen. It was all based on the
well,
Iranian 10-point plan. And
it could
what
be.
was asking on
No,
the part of the
no.
Americans, first of all, this is what the Iranians are talking about. Let me just, the first point was the United States was asking them not to enrich uranium on Iranian soil. This is one of the points of disagreements between the two parties. No enrichment in 20 years. It was part of the first line. And then the Strait of Hormuz, they wanted to be part of the Strait. They wanted to share the benefit of the Strait of Hormuz, which was responded by Iran and said, this is not the Gulf of Mexico. That's why you're not going to get anything here in the, that these were the main, disagreements between the two parties, as we've learned from Professor Marandi today.
It sounds to me like somebody making an excuse and not wanting to blame the Americans. So that account, for me, has no credibility. I don't believe a word of it. Now, you are implying that when Trump said he was going to blockade the strait, that Vance just decided to go home because the strait was going to be blockaded. I don't think
No, no, no. I said maybe it is related to what Donald Trump shared on the same day. Maybe. I don't know
well,
that.
how is Trump going to blockade the strait?
Because he said
If
that. He declared the blockade, naval blockade. And
Yeah, well, he says lots of things. He says even that he's Jesus. But
yeah,
if the American ships get close enough to the strait to blockade it, they're going to be blown out of the sea unless Iran surrenders. We already know the American Navy is stationed way off, hoping to be out of range of the Iranian hypersonic ballistic missiles. So how's he going to blockade the strait? Uh, Iran's got all these missiles. They got all these shore defenses. So if the American Navy is going to blockade it, it's going to have to be blockading it a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. So I don't understand. Trump said before he was going to escort ships through there, but he can't do that. He said before all the things he's going to do, but the Navy has to keep its distance. The photograph of the two U.S. destroyers going through, that was on the 11th when Iran opened the strait in keeping with the agreement about the negotiation. That part of the agreement to have negotiations last Saturday was that, which was the 11th, I think, yes,
yeah, yeah.
was that Iran would open the strait. But when the negotiations failed, they closed it. And there's not any American destroyers going through there now. So I don't see what Trump's talking about. He's going to blockade the strait. I don't understand why the Kremlin believes that. The Kremlin has said, "Oh, if he blockades the strait, the people can't get the oil, and the price will go higher." And well, the original Trump program was to get the strait unblocked, and now his program is to block it.
It's just
Well,
amazing.
now let me ask you this. How does it hurt Iran if the strait's
Yeah.
blocked? they, they don't need oil revenues to finance the war. They've got enough missiles. They can make what they need. They don't have to have foreign exchange to buy it abroad. They wouldn't be allowed to under the sanctions. So, as far as I can see, Iran doesn't need these revenues, at least not to carry on the war. And so, what does it matter?
Yeah.
But Trump can't block it unless our Navy ships are immune to hypersonic ballistic missiles, and they're not. If they were immune, they would be there now, not 2,000 kilometers away. So the talk about blocking the strait is nonsense. It's just, and I was in Washington 25 years. Negotiations, the people conducted them want them to go on forever. And they get mad if they're broken off. And the incentives negotiators have are quite different from what the government that sent them there has. And so, whatever this Iranian professor said, it doesn't really make any sense. And the the answer that was given by the American side was that Iran wouldn't give up making a nuke. And now I think the claim that they won't give up making a nuke is based on the fact that they're standing by their rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to enrich uranium. I think, it's been so long since I looked into all that. I may be wrong, but I believe that the countries that signed the non-proliferation are allowed to have nuclear power plants, to enrich uranium for medical isotopes and other reasons that they're used. And it's just that they're not going to enrich it up to the level that would provide material for a bomb. And Iran has always agreed to that. They've already signed the treaty. So, we had an agreement previously with Iran that the United States broke, in which Iran said, we're not going to make a bomb. So now all of a sudden, the story from the Trump regime is they're going to make a bomb. And so they wouldn't agree not to make a bomb. And so we're going to blockade the strait. So, look, the Israelis are not going to let there be a peace. As soon as the negotiations were announced, what happened? Israel attacked Lebanon. They bombed Tyre, the biblical city. I think it's a Christian city. I think it's full of Christians. And there's something like 2,000 dead and wounded. And of course, it's not soldiers they're bombing, it's residential civilians, it's residential housing, apartments. So clearly, and so what did the Americans do? Well, they covered it up and said, well, that's not part of the ceasefire. Well, it is part. The Iranians said that's part of the ceasefire. That's another reason the Iranians should not have gone to the negotiation, because the Israelis had already broken the ceasefire by bombing Yemen. It was part of not to bomb, I don't mean Yemen, Lebanon. Not to bomb Lebanon was in the 10 points. There was supposed to be a ceasefire everywhere. And then Israel says, well, we're not going to have one in Lebanon. And then Trump and Vance said, well, the agreement doesn't cover Lebanon, but it does. Well, so why did Iran go? That's another reason they shouldn't have gone. The agreement was already broken before they got there. So and they had to break their own vow to agree to go. Well, so that's two signs of weakness that Iran displayed. And so Trump just said, hell, they're weak. Give them our demands. And if they don't take it, it's over. So I think that's what happened. The Iranians should have said, well, you negotiate with yourself. You won't even keep the agreement long enough to have a negotiation. There's so many reports. He said this, he said that. It doesn't matter what any of them say.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters is a Zionist agenda of greater Israel. That's the only thing that matters. If that agenda is the agenda of the Israeli government, there can be no peace in the Middle East unless that agenda is realized and all the countries go the way of Libya and Iraq and Syria, or Israel is destroyed. There's no other possible outcome. So all the talk about negotiation, it's mindless. It's nonsensical. You're going to negotiate with somebody whose intent is to destroy you. Well, how do you know? How do you conduct that negotiation? Oh, only destroy part of us? How do you negotiate when somebody says, I'm going to kill you? What can you negotiate? If that's the agenda, there's nothing to negotiate. You fight for your life. That's the situation Iran is in. And if the United States and Israel win in Iran, then Turkey's next, just like former Israeli Prime Minister Bennett said. And then will be Saudi Arabia. And of course, if Iran goes, Lebanon's gone. Yemen's gone. Because Iran is the source of their ability to field resistance. So it's so clear and obvious. I don't understand any other aspect of the discussion. What is the point of it? And what's wrong with the Russians? Why did the Kremlin say, oh, if Trump blockades the strait, blah, blah? Well, why do they think he can blockade the strait? You tell me, how can he blockade the strait? Tell me, how? How can the U.S. Navy blockade the strait? How?
Yeah, it's almost impossible to do that
Yeah.
because they don't have the forces there. They don't have physically. It's not
It wouldn't matter
impossible.
how many ships they had there. The ships aren't bulletproof against ballistic missiles. They're not. And that's why they're standing off. So, let's talk about this. The real curious thing here is, no sooner than Trump gets out of the situation he put himself into, what night was it? He was supposed to destroy Iranian civilization that night. With an hour and a half to go, there's nothing he could do. With an hour and a half to go, he grabs the Iranian 10 points and says, oh, this is a basis for negotiation. So that let him out of the dilemma he put himself in with his vow to destroy Iranian civilization. And no sooner does he get out, and he gets right back in. And now he's going to blockade the strait. Well, how? How is he going to blockade the strait? Maybe he can send a bunch of American ships, and the Iranians will sink them, and the sunk ships will block the strait. Maybe that's how they can blockade the strait. But
You mentioned Russia, Paul, but we had the Chinese reaction to the blockade. The Chinese Defense Ministry said that Chinese ships continue to move in and out of the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. We have trades and energy agreements with Iran, which we will respect and abide by. We expect others not to interfere in our affairs. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz and has opened it to us. And it's a simple and direct message to Donald Trump. If you're going to do that, we're going to, our tanker is going to pass and you're not going to do anything against us.
Right. But you see here, even China thinks Trump can blockade the strait. Well, he can't. So what's the point of the Chinese message?
Yeah.
If the
It's
strait
political.
can't be
It's
blocked,
political because we had the reaction from the United Kingdom. We had the reaction from Australia. They said they're not going to be part of the blockade. Donald Trump somehow puts out something to see what would be the reactions from other countries. I think that's the way that he's playing around with the countries. And he wanted to put pressure, psychological pressure on Iranians. And today, just imagine on Saturday night, J.D. Vance has decided to leave the negotiations. And today, again, Donald Trump, after announcing the blockade, here is what he said today.
I can tell you that we've been called by the other side. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
What was the sticking?
He's just making things up.
look, Israel was opposed to any negotiations, and they just told Trump to get his man home and close it down. That's the simplest explanation of what happened. Israel just said, look here, Mr. Puppet Punk, Trump, get your man home, close this down. We won't tolerate it. That's probably the only logical and reasonable explanation. Israel told Trump to call it off. And he did. But it couldn't go anywhere anyhow. There's no way, nothing could have happened other than the Israelis standing up and saying, we renounce Greater Israel. Without that, there's nothing the negotiations could do except kick the can down the road. Maybe Israel and Trump would like to have some sort of a pseudo solution in order to build back up their missile defense systems. That would be the only reason for Israel and the U.S. to have negotiations. The only reason would be to make enough interceptors to be able to withstand the bombardment from Iran. But that would be a short-term thing. You can't, once again, how do you negotiate when the agenda is your extermination, your demise? How do you negotiate that? What do you, does Iran think that it can convince the Zionists to give up their agenda? They can only do that if they have the Zionists on the point of extermination. If it's Israel, you see, and again, this negotiation, what should be negotiated is the Israeli Zionist agenda, not Iran's rights. Why would Iran want to negotiate its rights to enrich uranium or its rights to control its coastal waterways? Why should Iran be negotiating its rights instead of Israel's claims to the Mideast, or what they call now West Asia? That's what should be negotiated, is Israel's claims to Greater Israel. These claims are real. The prime ministers have made them for decades. They stand up, they hold the maps. It used to be from the Nile to the Euphrates. The Euphrates is a river that splits Iraq in half. And then they wanted to include all of Iraq and half of Saudi Arabia. And then the last time, it was all of Saudi Arabia. And then the minister said, and Turkey is next to it. So Turkey is now part of Greater Israel. Well, how do you negotiate that? And instead, Iran goes to negotiate whether or not it can control its own waterways and whether or not it can use its own rights to enrich uranium. Rights, I think it has under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, I may be wrong. It's been too long since.
Yeah. You're right.
But
You're right.
I am right. Okay. They have the right to do that. Okay. Well, so it made no sense for Iran to even go to the negotiations. It was stupid. It was stupid. They shouldn't have gone. Nothing could come out of it. And nothing can come out of any negotiation in the Middle East. What few sources of resistance to Israel that exist, they need to organize and realize that they're slated to be destroyed. Period. It's not negotiable. That's the situation.
Paul, we had the opposition leader in Taiwan going to China. How is the situation in the Middle East, in the West Asia, influencing the case of Taiwan? Because they're witnessing what has happened to American bases in the West Asia, in these GCC countries. And they would imagine if something happens between Taiwan and China, who's going to defend them? Taiwan is an island. It's nothing for China.
I don't know what China thinks about the likelihood of the United States putting missiles in Taiwan or bringing its Navy close enough for Chinese missiles to do what the Iranian ones can do. I don't know. I think from everything I've seen of China, they're not inclined to have a fight. Recently it seems that the Chinese leader purged the army of the generals and officers who were inclined to fight for China because he doesn't want a fighting army. And he put in a bunch of politicians who will be looking over their shoulder to see what the Chinese leadership want, which is not to fight. So I think the Chinese leadership are simply saying we're going to avoid conflict and just wait out the enemies. This is an old Chinese habit, goes back millenniums. So I think we may have talked before, I don't know, but we're very exposed to China. We've got all kinds of factories in China. Apple, they could just nationalize those companies. And they wouldn't have to pay out. They just say, hey, we're taking you. Kind of like Trump took the oil away from Venezuela. Well, China can take Apple and everything else that's there. And there would be chaos on Wall Street. All of a sudden, Apple stock is worth nothing because the Chinese have confiscated it and won't pay. You know, if this is what Trump did to Venezuela's oil, well, China can do it to Apple. So I think the real question is what's going to become of the conflict in Ukraine. The Russian Minister of Defense just recently released the number of attacks by the Ukrainians during the Easter holiday that Trump had declared as a ceasefire. There were thousands of these attacks. So it doesn't look like Ukraine's losing. And the attacks get deeper into Russia, and Putin does nothing. He does nothing. And he has also this crazy notion of negotiating with Trump. And he says that Trump's Russia's best hope, and we mustn't criticize him. And so we now see Trump and his spokesman making apologies for Trump. And nothing's come of those negotiations. So, and Putin still won't use the force it takes to end the conflict. He's almost determined not to win because it'll upset the Americans. And Russia won't get to be part of the West, and all the oligarchs won't be able to get all their frozen assets back. And so it looks like for the Russian government, money is more important than sovereignty. So,
Paul, what is happening mentally to Donald Trump? Because he shared a photo, as you mentioned, it's as he's Jesus, but then he said that no, I was somehow saying that I am a doctor there to to cure people. Nobody gonna buy these sort of arguments on his part. And what is happening? Because there are people around him. I don't know, these pastors, priests around him in making this sort of argument. You are a unique person. What you're doing is just like a prophet. What is that? Is that giving him some sort of delusional thinking that he has some sort of mission?
it could be, his government are Zionist. So that, of course, supports Netanyahu's hold on Trump, as does all the Jewish money that comes his way in political campaign and earlier in his life and his financing of his real estate deals. And I don't know what it is with Trump. Maybe it's just he's so frustrated that he has lost control of himself, because his statements are just, first of all, they're shocking. That he decides what the law is. That's what he thinks. The law is what he thinks, not. And the thing he posted, looking like Jesus with his hand on Lazarus' forehead, about to raise the dead. I suppose this appeals to the Zionist or the Christian Zionists, as they're called. And so it holds that part of his support with him. But I think it worries everybody else.
Mm.
And people are saying that because there's so much opposition to this war, and because the Americans are finally seeing through Israel. Now the polls are 60% of Americans have a negative view of Israel. That's 60%. Well, used to, you probably couldn't get 20% with a negative view. So it's a situation where if this dissatisfaction with Israel and with the war, and in general with Trump's rather absurd statements and absurd claims, he's going to lose the midterm election. The Republicans will lose. The Democrats will be back. And then I think impeachment begins. It's a shame. You see, what's really happened is
He's attacking Pope. You just imagine who's gonna do that.
Well, now he's attacked the Catholic Church. He's attacked the Pope. So he's lost the Catholic vote. What vote does he have? That's Christian Zionist. That's his vote. Well, you see, here's the tragedy, Nima. It's really got nothing to do with Iran or Russia. Netanyahu has used Trump in a way that has destroyed the Trump movement to restore America. Instead of restoring America, he's out fighting wars, stealing other countries. He doesn't just want Iran and Venezuela, but he wants Cuba and Greenland. Who knows who else? And so he's sitting duck for retribution once the Republicans don't control the House and Senate. So he could be gone by next January or February. He could just be gone. And the tragedy is here, the Democrats will again reopen the border. They will again impose DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. That is, promotion is not based on merit. So a merit-based system is gone. And when the merit-based system is gone, so is equal treatment under the law, because the DEI gives privilege under the law to favored groups, favored races, favored genders, favored sexual preferences. So ordinary white heterosexual people become second-class citizens like they were under Biden and Obama. And lawfare comes back. So law is simply a weapon in the hands of the government against whoever it wants to get. Law is no longer a protector of people from the government. It's a weapon the government uses to get people. So this is the consequence. However bad the bombings are for Iran, what we've lost is any chance, any possibility of restoring the United States. So in will come millions of people. Now, these millions of people are not self-supporting. Eventually, some of them get to be, but apparently not all of them ever do. And they come in. Well, they need housing, they need food, they need medical service, they need education. Who pays for it? The American citizens who are already hard pressed. You know, according to the Federal Reserve, 40% of American households cannot raise $400. They live on credit cards and their debts mount because they can't pay the payment. They can only pay the minimum payment. So every month they're deeper in debt. Well, when you impose millions of people's health care, education, food, housing on people who are already at the limit, what do you get? So this is the real cost of the war. It is the destruction of the United States, which will happen when the Democrats are back in office. Open borders, endless spending on illegal aliens, destruction of the rights of normal Americans in favor of preferred genders, preferred races, preferred sexual preferences, and the use of war as a weapon. So that's the consequence of Netanyahu's control over Trump. If the American people understood that, the percentage of the population that has a negative view of Israel would go up from 60% to 98%. And we have no alternative party. We have the Republicans who represent Israel, and we have the Democrats who represent immigrant invaders. No one represents the American citizen. No one. No party. So this is the consequence of this ability of Netanyahu to cause Trump to serve Israel. Now, Trump's not unique in this. Obama, Biden, George W. Bush, and Dick Cheney, they all did the same thing. It all started with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and 9/11. That was the opening for the United States to destroy for Israel at American expense, American blood, American money. I'm told it's something like $3 trillion the United States spent destroying Libya, Iraq, Syria. So it's been going on for a quarter of a century. And Iran is the first one that seems to have any capability of withstanding the assault. And as I've said, this whole program, that's Iran's only option. It has no other option. Peace is not on the table. Iran's single option is to stand up to the Israeli assault. And if there wasn't an Israeli assault, there wouldn't be an American one, because an American one is adjunct to the agenda of Greater Israel. And that's the true situation. So what some professor says about a negotiation is meaningless. The negotiation was meaningless. And yet they'll continue to talk about negotiations. Even the Iranians will.
Yeah. Let's see what would happen. I think, the situation is somehow getting so dangerous, in my opinion, because even with the ceasefire, nobody knows what would happen, because anytime they can attack each other. And
Well, as long as the Israeli agenda is greater Israel, yes.
Mhm.
And they're right now, they're attacking Lebanon.
Lebanon.
And yeah, Lebanon. And they, of course, will renew the attack on Iran, when? It doesn't mean tomorrow. Maybe they can't renew it until they get some more interceptors. Do something. Right now, they don't have any defense from these missiles because all the radar stations are blown up.
Hmm.
See, this is where Iran has failed. It's destroyed the ability of the United States to protect its bases in the Gulf states, and it's destroyed Israel's ability to protect itself. And then it stopped instead of finishing the job. Well, when you stop, it lets them find a way to increase the ability to protect themselves. They'll renew the radar, they'll do something, and then they'll restart it. I don't think Israel will want to restart the war with Iran until they have some way to block the missiles. Because Israel's not very big, and if Iran was determined, it could turn Israel into Gaza. But you see, the Iranians don't seem to understand it's a fight to the death. For the Iranians, it's still tit for tat. If they hit us, we'll hit them. Well, that's not how you survive. The only way Iran can survive is they understand they're slated to be exterminated, and they have to exterminate Israel first. That's the only choice that they have. They don't have a choice of negotiating it away. They could surrender. The Iranians can surrender, but they don't have any choice of negotiating the threat away. And there's no agreement they would ever get that would mean anything that eliminates the threat, unless it's the agreement of Israel to abandon the agenda of Greater Israel.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Great pleasure as always.
Okay, Nima. All
And
right.
see you soon. Bye-bye. Take care,
Goodbye.
Paul. Goodbye.
Goodbye.